10th day of April 2023. Hello everybody, welcome. I'm going to be your host, Dana Durnford. You can call me the Gamma Goat. You can call me at 709-589-4406. All five of you. So we're going to be polled tonight, a big shot poll. Should nuclear power plants, fuel pools, emissions be classified as weapons of mass destruction? We got 3 times more votes than we do people on the show. That's pretty normal around here. Hey, let's get after. We got lots of, oh my God, not again stuff to cover. That's nuclear, isn't it? Why does nuclear have to be such a... Well, you know what I mean. Don't need to explain it to you folks. What do we got for us tonight? We're going to do a news cycle tonight. Been a long time since we've done one of them. At least 20 hours anyway. Germany turns its back on nuclear for good. Aw, poor nuclear. So, step back 3 months, and the world was attacking Germany for turning off nuclear. Germany said, okay, well, we'll extend it. And then all the scum left him alone, and all he done was extend it for 3 months. What date did I say? Today's the 11th. Did I say 10th? Today's the 1 month after the 12th anniversary. It's April 11th, 2023, just to clarify. Because in the back of my head, in my head, I thought it was the 10th, maybe, just in case. So Germany is going to switch off its nuclear disease factories in just a few days. Now, they still got fuel pools that are splitting the atoms into the environment all day, every night. There's around 1,000 of them worldwide, and this is why we got a poll. Should nuclear power plants fuel pools? Because the fuel pools are decades of reactor cores, no containment, that are still splitting the atoms into the environment. That's why almost all of them are surrounded by farms. And the ones that are not are very suspect. What are they up to? Because that's how they poison you at your supermarkets. Well, it's another way, right? The emissions, because they're splitting atoms into the environment, the same as they were for the power of 1 million homes for each reactor. And the pools could easily have, say, 5 reactor cores in a pool. So that's 5 million homes worth of atoms being split into the environment. And they know it. This is why it's surrounded by farms. It's evil on just a completely different level. There's nothing else on the planet can touch them for evilness. And so the emissions from the fuel pools, if we're going to be honest, would be classified as weapons of mass destruction and attack upon all species. And the doctors in the 50s, 60s would describe man-made radiation as a biological weapon. That's how they characterized it, and that's how they would treat it, as a biological weapon when somebody was infested with the atomic plague, right? It's really a plague. It never goes away on top of that. So it's the worst plague we've ever heard tell of is nuclear fallout. And there's just the fuel pools on their own are catastrophic to every species. So that's pretty good news that they're going to close down all the reactors, aka disease factories. Despite the energy crisis, which is self-inflicted, how quick we forget, are self-inflicted by sanctions, right? And because you can't replace it, then you're going to have instant inflation. And that's why United Nations, which shouldn't exist, tricked and deceived and manipulated 195 countries with no input from the countries into implementing sanctions and can't replace it, the commodities necessary. And so that caused the massive inflation in the fuel prices. This is by design, right? Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, many of the current president and future so-called leaders participated in and were considered young global leaders at the World Economic Forums, which is Klaus Schwab, which is an invasion, basically. He has co-opted Canada, half the parliament in Canada, 2,000 people admitted to going to his lectures. They have to fly to another country, and then they get indoctrinated. I don't know, they might be getting chipped too, because if you really want to see what evil looks like, it's the World Economic Forum and the people that participated in it. So it was quite a coincidence that Klaus Schwab had Vladimir Putin, Justin Trudeau, Angela Merkel, and many of the current leaders and future ones at a meeting, and were young global leaders when they were young. Now they're in positions of authority and they're wrecking the world, like everything Klaus Schwab touches ends up doing. So the energy crisis is self-inflicted worldwide. Russia's just going to sell the oil to somebody else. They're not going to be hurt by embargoes and sanctions. The country is pulling the plug on its last 3 reactors on Saturday, the 15th of April. Betting will succeed in the green transition without nuclear disease factories. While many Western countries depend on nuclear power, they don't depend on it. The only one stupid enough to become dependent upon it is France. And look at France. Half their fleet is down, the rest of it is decrepit and about to break down. They don't have any water to run the reactors. They're saying they're going to build 6, but they don't have the resources. They don't have the water. They can't build reactors anywhere else. It's hard to imagine they're going to build their own reactors. And how come they haven't started? They can't put them on the river. They don't have enough water to run the reactors they got there, right? Europe's largest economy is turning the page, even if the subject remains controversial until the end. It's not controversial. How is it controversial? Why is it controversial? Because the industry is crazy. Nuclear industry it freaks out over a plant closing because it's not going to be poisoning people, right? Germany is implementing the decision to phase out the disease factories. Was taken in 2002. Pre-Angela Merkel, by the way. Who's a particle physicist and was demonized and vilified constantly by the media. They forgot to mention how kind of education she actually has. The announcement convinced public opinions in the country with a powerful anti-nuclear movement. It was initially fueled by fears of a Cold War, and then by accidents like Chernobyl and Mayak and Santa Susana and 3 Mile Island and SL1 and Sellafield in Sweden, all the dumping into the oceans, their own accidents, and the list is very long. Mayak has an accident every couple of years. The invasion of Ukraine, by the way, when you look at the studies of Ukraine, or Germany, from Chernobyl, you have to be crazy to keep nuclear, right? They were completely destroyed. All their drinking water, all their farmlands, all their communities. Explosion in Down syndrome and autism. The invasion of Ukraine undertook, there's 1,800 diseases besides cancer that the scumbags only mention as cancer. The invasion of Ukraine brought everything into question, deprived of Russia gas. They weren't deprived of it. They were forced to embargo it by UN, right? The UN is not supposed to exist. Who the frig are these people? We don't need you. What country needs UN? It's 195 militaries. its entire legacy is predicated upon murder. And you go way back and look at UN after the League of Nations, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The League of Nations basically just changed its name to United Nations, United. It's a trick, right? They're no different than Walmart. They're just a corporation. Deprived of Russia gas. They don't have, like, a country should have a referendum to implement the United Nations suggestion. They don't make policies because they don't have any authority. Think about this. But countries buy into whatever it is that they say, and therefore you don't have a country no more. The minute you've done that, you no longer have a country. If you can't make up your own mind, why would you need United Nations again? This is why we have referendums, folks. So we don't have something like a global military-industrial complex disguised as united. So deprived of Russia gas, everybody was deprived because they put sanctions against it. I posted a video when they announced the sanctions through UN, who told 195 countries to put sanctions on Russia at the one time. That's a proxy war, by the way. It backfired because they're all in on it. But just a few months to go before the initial deadline for closing the last 3 reactors on the 31st of December, because it was supposed to be closed down by January 1st of this year, the tide, which is when they closed the last 3 reactors the year before 2021, the tide of the public opinion began to turn. With high energy prices through artificial inflation, self-inflicted inflation, and the burning issue of climate change caused by 80 years of emissions from the nuclear power industry, because the emissions never go away and they all pulse energy at the speed of light, the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas, and by proxy, because they don't mingle, they create X-rays, this breaking effect. And so all the species got whole body X-rays. You kill the bacteria and the fungus in the forest, so the forest no longer sucks up water, and it doesn't break down the foliage or the litter in the forest. And what that means is when you get a lightning strike, you have these brutal flash forest fires that lift way more material than would normally exist, because normally the litter and the foliage would break down, but now it's not breaking down because of the radioactive fallout. The full body X-rays throughout the forest have sterilized species and eliminated them in increments over decades. And Fukushima was a pulse, a continuous pulse on top of that, but it was a shock to the system, right? This was a huge pulse of millions and millions and millions of pounds released into the environment, on top of all the weapon testing, the dumping, all the 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day for 80 years. And you're always adding more fuel. That's going to hemorrhage into the environment, splitting the atoms. So when I say hemorrhaging into the environment, it's the fuel is splitting the atoms. It never stops. It's no longer under pressure anymore and temperature, right? And to keep it in water, but still splitting the atoms. Each pool, there's 1,000 of them, balls off about 120,000 liters a day. And the reason it balls it off is because it's producing so many atoms. Those atoms are soaked up in the water, released as steam up to tall, skinny stacks, and these places surrounded by farms. Now you're liberating the isotopes into the environment. It's an ingenious slow kill, right? But it's indiscriminate. So it kills, it's collective punishment for all the species. Nothing with replicating cells has a autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Are you getting it yet? Because you better. Anyway, Germany only extended it for 3 months, and the industry used that 3 months to say, see, Germany didn't close its nuclear power plant, so we need more nuclear, because nuclear is proven. Meanwhile, they forgot to mention it's only for 3 months. But they were trying to use it to prop up the nuclear industry. And we would cover it all day in every story for months and months and months. They would use that same routine. Yes, MIT. MIT's a hard case, eh? They've been promoting nuclear power for 90 years, I think it is. 90 years. They're real little demonic demons, actually. So, they say shutting down the coal plants will cause an extra 5,000 nuclear plants will cause an extra 5,000 premature deaths each year with 8 billion people. So, first off, this is nuclear plume. Gas, oil, and coal plumes don't cover the planet. You won't find models like this of gas, oil, and coal plumes, okay? This is only for nuclear. It covers the whole planet. And it covered it in 19.5 days, 468 hours, I think it is. Yeah, 468 hours. See? Bear with me, we're getting there. Forgot what I was doing. That's what I meant to do. So, gas, oil, and coal doesn't cover the planet. That's an invisible plume, full body x-rays for every species on the planet. Meanwhile, MIT, who promoted nuclear disease factories for 90 years, is saying shutting down nuclear power could increase the air pollution. And bizarrely, they're only talking 5,000 premature deaths. I can show you headlines where they predicted 8 million. The think tanks were posting, getting media to post their version. MIT. So, cancer-causing radioactive waste dumped in the Hudson River, which is Indian Point, right? So, Holtec, a private corporation, Chris Singh, he's doing he gets the contract to decommission these private corporation. So the government has really no ultimate oversight over them. They're a private company. They're a corporation, and they're on the stock exchange. So OSHA and the rest of them can't surprise inspect them because they have human rights that they're not entitled to through amendment made to the American Constitution called corporate personhood. And it gave corporations certain human rights, not all of them, but certain human rights, piggybacked in on an amendment meant to free slaves from an oppressive government. And so the corporations manipulated that and gave themselves certain rights that protects them or gives them certain protections, anyway, from scrutiny. So you can't surprise inspect them. They can put their money in offshore accounts. They don't have to pay taxes, state, federal, local. And Justice Hugo Black, a Supreme Court justice at the time, had wrote an eloquent dissent about the dangers of giving corporations human rights. And he said it was absurd that a law meant to free slaves from an oppressive government was being used by corporations to oppress a solvent people. You're supposed to be the solvent people. But they have more rights than you because they have money. It takes money to exercise your rights. And has been weaponized. And so you can't put the head of Google or the head of Facebook or the head of Twitter or whatever in jail or give them a criminal record because the company is an entity. It has human rights on its own. So all you can do is give it a fine. And because it doesn't pay state, federal, local taxes, that money goes to an offshore account. So when they get a fine, they just take some of the tax money they didn't pay, and they pay their fine, which is considered basically these days, the last couple of decades, as just a kickback. Right? That's really all it is. Because they can pull the same trick in different countries, because you can't be held responsible. And if you catch them in one country, that don't mean another country is going to punish them, right? Or investigate them. So Holtec is going to dump 1 million gallons of radioactive waste into the Hudson River that comes to New York, which goes past New York, downstream from Indian Point. So the fuel pools, and this is what we're going to poll tonight, by the way, the fuel pools are always hemorrhaging radiation. So yes, the water is radioactive, but every day there's 120,000 liters released from the pools. And each liter is trillions of man-made isotopes. They're liberated into the environment, and they add to the collective. And this has been going on for 80 years. All the accidents, all the dumping, all the fuel worldwide is still splitting atoms into the environment. And it's, I can't imagine something more important. I can't really, like a biological weapon is scary because it's got so many, possibilities of wrecking the planet. But nuclear wrecks everything with replicating cells. Nothing is safe from it. Your body attacks it. Everything that gets in your body, it'll attack each atom for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And so that compromises your immune system immediately. So you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. And so Holtec has been doing this all over the country. This is their norm. This is how they make a profit. Can't make a profit by storing it for 100 years. So first off, they're going to tell you it's tritium, and then they're going to say that it's legal to dump it. That's how it works. They're not going to tell you about the other 1,000 isotopes that are in the water. Vast majority of the isotopes are short-lived. That makes them even more dangerous. And even if when these isotopes finally decay, these man-made anthropogenic isotopes decay down to lead, it's still radioactive lead. It's not considered normal lead that is created by the sun. The elements from a nuclear power plant, we call them man-made, because they're not created by the sun. Right? We're acclimated to all the elements in the periodic table because that's what we're made of. Right? That's the elements of a stardust to us. Right? It's acceptable. Our immune system is set up to deal with it, but it doesn't understand man-made radiation, and they name it similar to disguise it, to manipulate you. It's a very, very, very touchy subject, and we cover this almost every night. This is why I practically get no views, is because the censorship is freaked out by these topics and these polls. You will never see it anywhere else on the planet, unfortunately, and we're hoping to change that so I can take a break. So saying 5,000 premature deaths a year by closing down the reactors, there's 1,800 diseases from nuclear. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. It's just a couple of handfuls, and if you do studies around nuclear within 15 to 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, you see those diseases explode compared to places with no nuclear power plants. It's just an absolute explosion of autoimmune diseases. So they try to confuse you and say, well, we don't see an uptick in cancer, so everything is good. That's how they do it. And they surround the nuclear power plants with farms. um, so that they keep the levels around the plant low, and so they can poison you at the supermarket. That's not an accident. That's Indian Point. So how nuclear kills fish. This is about Indian Point and New York, by the way. The aging plants have a devastating impact on surrounding fish populations. This is in response to MIT's study. Environmental analysts in 2 states have found the facilities kill more than 17 billion fish a year. In New York, and another 9 billion in New Jersey. Just different ways a single power plant kills fish. And that the ones through cooling system are vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish and destroying them in the heat exchangers. And there's a strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of baby fish than the overfishing of the adults. And that the Indian Point on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily. And people think the 1,000 tanks at Fukushima is where all the water's gone to. They need this before they melt down. Can you imagine what they need after it melts down? Kills about 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens and the thermal plumes. And the NRC estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year, and they're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. 40 feet wide. Do you know what they're using in Fukushima right now? They got a garden hose split 4 ways. That's what they're telling everybody. A garden hose is about 140 tons a day. In fact, they're saying there's only 100 tons a day, so it's a low pressure garden hose. It's spraying water on 4 melted reactor cores. That's what they're claiming. Just want to kick the shit out of everybody in the nuclear industry every time they open their mouths. Shutting down nuclear power could increase air pollution. MIT. Shutting down nuclear power plants will save hundreds of millions of people's lives. It'll stop billions of diseases worldwide on top of that. Nuclear is responsible for the majority of the diseases that are prolific. Heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. The team has put numbers to the prediction, estimating an increase in air pollution would have serious effects, resulting in an additional 5,200 pollution-related deaths over a single year. There's over 1,000 mass shootings a year just in the United States alone, by the way. U.S. House bill to address compensation for veterans and families toxic exposure at the Nevada nuclear test site, but shutting down nuclear will save lives. It didn't save any of their life, and they were denied for 80 years almost. U.S. to address House. See, you know, the Trinity site, where they'd done the first nuclear bombs and many, many, many more after, the people around that are not entitled to compensation, but many, many other states are. The entire states, too. But not ground zero for radioactive fallout. And only for certain cancers instead of the actual health issues, like heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory, which many will die from, obviously, right? And for children, it burns like plutonium, xenon, stuff like this, burns a hole through the lungs, ends up in the bone marrow, and mutates the stem cells, which triggers absurd amount of diseases. They're very susceptible to everything and anything. The Minnesota nuclear, and again, right, to use the word leak, which, you know, any media that does use calls 400,000 gallons of leak should be arrested and charged with being a degenerate scumbag, at least. Leaks were contained are public mass murders, because that's what you're doing by lying about what's really happening. They waited 4 months. Excel waited 4 months to tell the locals about the leak or anybody else. So that meant the leak, and you got me saying it now, the radioactive hemorrhaging that was coming from a high pressure pipe, which would have been uranium, plutonium, and everything else. It was frozen ground, but it went straight down to the Mississippi and all the way down to the coastline, and every community in between. So they waited 4 months for it to go all the way down to the ocean before they told people. And then they say they don't see any effects. In fact, by shutting it down, there was a bunch of fish died because of temperature variation, which is apparently is normal around nuclear power plants when you shut them down, because they produce so much hot water. So there was a cold shock this time of the year, right? So then they used that to manipulate you even more. And so calling them scumbags is being polite. Calling them mass murderers is actually being polite. These are the worst of the worst humans imaginable. These are the most remorseless species we've ever heard tell of, is the people in the nuclear industry. They don't care about anything, including themselves and their own loved ones. Leaks was contained, he says, and posed no danger. Well, if it posed no danger, why didn't you tell people? Why'd you wait 4 months? Only reason you wait 4 months is so people can't check and see it themselves. See, if you had an explosion, people could just go down to the river and start taking samples, right? Or, use Geiger counters to check the air. But if you don't tell anybody there's a release, no one can check. And that's why they done it that way. And then when he finally announced it, the same day, they had all the placards ready and all the videos ready to public meetings. Come on down, we'll explain the tritium to you. It's so evil. I don't understand why police don't arrest him. This is actual murder, what we're talking about, on a very large, very, very, very large scale. It's actual murder we're talking about. And so that would have caused infinitely more than 5,000 deaths, ultimately. Because you're talking about all these communities would have been sucking up. And I can guarantee, because they just fixed it, it's not like it fixed itself. They didn't identify it. They don't tell you where the leak came from. They won't show you any pictures of anything. So it's a major high-pressure leak because they shut down the plant to fix it. There's only one reason you're going to shut down the plant to fix it. And Clark, the president himself, met the people. This is extraordinary on top of that. Because he didn't trust his scumbags that works for him to lie properly. So he had to do it himself to feel good about it. It's the ultimate betrayal what they done. And so they should be, everybody should sue them. Lawmaker tables a bill recognizing damage from Fukushima water as fishing industry disaster. This is South Korea. And this lawmaker here has just... A lawmaker of the main opposition Democratic Party on Tuesday proposed a bill that recognizes damage to agricultural products caused by the Japs' planned release of radioactive water from the nuclear meltdown, aka crippled Fukushima disease factory, as a fishing industry disaster. This is 2012, this is 2023, right? Well, let's go backwards for a second. Anytime you're ready. Cesium-137 hotspots detected in Seoul, South Korea. That's 2011, not 2023. This is how they play the game, right? Emitting 1,000% normal background radiation. There is no such thing as a normal, by the way. 1,200 kilometers from the disease factory known as Fukushima. Cesium-137 hotspot detected in Seoul, South Korea. Okay. South Korea radioactive store-bought seaweed 0.81 microsieverts per hour. But you don't measure food in microsieverts, you measure it in atomic decays because that's why it's radioactive. It's actual physical fallout. You're not by the fuel pools or something looking for microsieverts and millisieverts and sieverts. You're 1,200 kilometers away. So you're looking for physical atoms, not microsieverts. Radioactive iodine in 6 seaweed samples by South Korea. Concern over Fukushima. TEPCO emits plant is leaking. See that word, leaking? No matter which accident it is, which nuclear power plant, that's the only word they're going to use. Worldwide, by the way. Breaking news, South Korea banned 35 Japanese seafoods products due to radiation fears. That's 2012. So they poisoned everybody for over a year. South Korea bans all fishery products from 8 Japanese prefectures, 2013. September, so that's over 2 years later before they banned it. Because they didn't want to eat it themselves. See? Public concern about Japanese fish imports in South Korea looks to be justified. Contaminated seafood recently on sale in South Korea added to fears. Over 6 million pounds since 3/11 that they caught before the consumers consumed and got sick and died. Nuclear expert, xenon detection in South Korea may be from Fukushima reactors. Really, where else is it going to be? It showed up everywhere else. How come Korea couldn't have it? Criticality or spontaneous fission of the curium to blame. 2013. So the xenon's got a very short half-life. So the big plume show up. It never stopped melting down. It's still doing it today. South Korean officials say radiation detection rose because 2 Fukushima reactors are currently leaking. See that word, leaking? Anybody who says that in relationship to nuclear should have their brains pulled out through their eye sockets. Officials unsure what to do next. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. So for Korea to claim that they're worried about the dumping of the water after all the dumping of radioactive fallout is really interesting. There's no way they don't know what I'm showing you. There's zero possibilities. It's zilch. Oh, by the way, did I mention degenerate MIT? So shutting down disease factories will cause 5,000 premature deaths. I think people at MIT should go down to Fukushima and have to work personally. Alternatives to dumping Fukushima wastewater in the Pacific. Hey, you're 12 years too late. They haven't stopped for 12 years. A typical plant is going through a couple of billion gallons of a day. 4,800 tons a minute, 1,440 minutes a day for each reactor. You really think all the water they're pouring over the reactor has gone into the 1,000 tanks that they all built at the one time? Right? So this is about making people think only about what might happen, not about what has never stopped happening. Pretending that there's no pollution in the ocean. That's what that story is about. Each time you see those narratives. That's what South Korea was doing, pretending there's nothing dumped into the ocean, despite all the headlines I just showed you. This Honolulu, Hawaii, right? Talking about an alternative. This is the industry posting this stuff in different countries, right? They pay the media. The media gives a little kickback to whatever journalist signs their name on it. We covered this last night. The poll was on this last night. So they're moving children officially back to start school in an abandoned community with 14 million one-ton bags of radiation. And their children are already living in another nuclear wasteland. But they're going to move them back next door, 2 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns, to go to school. and surrounded on top of that by what they call a no-go zone. And so they open these little sections, and in Okuma, where they're going to have the school, that area is 10% of the town. The rest of the town is off limit. So the school bus can't stop until it gets to the school because the radioactive is too hot to stop the truck. Well, radiation doesn't just stick to the ground. It's airborne. The reactors are still melting down. I don't know why the world is sitting in silence and allowing this to happen. I don't understand how that works. I can't comprehend that level of cowardness. The town of Kuma, that hosts part of the nuclear meltdown, aka plant, held a ceremony Monday for the return of classes to the town. Can you imagine what kind of scumbags they are to do that? 26 children who will attend the school, an elementary, junior high school, as well as a certified child daycare. How does a daycare within eyesight of multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns get certified? How do we ever come to that level? How do we ever become that complacent? How do we get that stupid? Every time I heard official or authority, they're literally either stupid or just evil or a lot of both. How do you sit there and rationalize that this is somehow acceptable? Certified in a nuclear no-go zone. So the certification word means zero. And it's very dangerous, actually. You can't have a future and nuclear. You can't have the word humanity and nuclear on the same planet. The entire planet should be trying to stop this industry. Stop this madness so the future generation might exist, because there won't be a future generation unless we do something radical immediately. And Germany just took the first step, but they still got fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And hemorrhaging doesn't do justice how much radiation we're actually talking about of each of these fuel pools. Which is why we got a very powerful poll tonight. Should disease factories, fuel pools, radioactive fallout emissions be classified as weapons of mass destruction? WMDs. Why, yes, they should, says the majority of the wonderful voters. During the first semester, the student will take classes at rooms in the town's, in the nuclear wastelands facility, and the Okuma Municipal Government Building. The victims will attend classes at the new nuclear wasteland building from the second semester. This should not be allowed to happen. It's not too late to stop this. Because you're setting a precedence that you don't want. Trust me. You might not know it right now, but you don't want to let them set these types of precedences. Okay, I'm not here every day because I'm bored, okay? I'm here from desperation that the world get its shit together and deal with it. Stop being cowards and deal with it. Go up and get ready and get busy and hold them accountable. And I'm doing the best I can. I know it's not enough. But it'll be fucking silent out there if I don't show up each day. And that scares me more than anything you can imagine. There's nothing on the planet that scares me more than that. That there will be no opposition, no honest educational program. There's no opinions in this. I deal with nothing but facts. There's no conjectures. There's no opinions. There's no way to misinterpret the reality, what I show you. There's very graphic. I don't... life is too precious, right? We get this one kick at the can. And I'm not going to look back on my life and say I wish. I'll say I've done everything I could with every fiber in my body every single day. I went to war for every species, and not only humans, but every species. The town's government functions were located to the city, Masu, about 100 kilometers from the prefecture. It's interesting they named it in this story, right? Because most of them are actually, as we covered before, Koriyama City, which is an actual nuclear wasteland. And so is that place too, by the way. We covered that. Confirmation of nuclear is environmentally sustainable removes uncertainty in how to build confidence. Opinion. That's not an opinion. Like, do you look at the resources? Now, everything that they use, first off, has to be the best of the best. Everything has to be... Is this Sellafield, or is this, I'm sorry, this is the United Kingdom, right? This is the biggest construction project on Earth ever, what they're doing there. And every piece of metal has to be inspected 3 times. It has to be the best of the best. Everything they use, every wire, all the cement. And there's enough cement there to build a sidewalk to Rome. Everything's going to be bombarded, by the way, with neutrons for its existence. It's already surrounded by farms, so they can poison you that way. These are prolific disease factories on a level that the average person can't even comprehend. Like if you go talk to an average person on the planet, and you got all the documentation, all the graphs, all the information, they still couldn't comprehend the actual true number. They'll realize this is horrible, but they still won't be able to appreciate how horrible. Because the releases from the fuel pools are stunning. Will enable the UK to plan and finance nuclear energy infrastructure in the long term. Because in the spring budget, they confirmed it as... Did I get that backwards? The Chancellor confirmed nuclear as environmentally sustainable, moving an element of uncertainty, which will enable the UK to plan and finance nuclear energy infrastructure in the long term, because they inappropriately classified it as sustainable, but it's not sustainable. They don't have any rules, right? They'll make it up as they go along, and everybody else better wear their seatbelts, right? There's nobody to hold them accountable. They got the goon squad ready to shoot you if you don't use your seatbelts, but there's no one to shoot them for genocide and omnicide against the planet. This is a planet-wide contamination machines. These are disease factors. Perception of nuclear technology by both investors and general public is largely based on well-known, highly publicized international events, most notably Chernobyl and the more recent Fukushima. Both of these incidences are preventable, but they weren't. It doesn't matter if they were preventable, they happened. And let's say they were preventable for a second, but there was no reason for them to grow food in the nuclear wasteland alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation where no one's allowed to live, surrounded by nuclear wasteland, right? Do you get it? They welcomed it. And now look what they've done to us, to the entire planet. They exported that stuff. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it for over a decade. You got any idea how this actually works? Any idea how late it is, how far down the hole we actually are? The shift in perception would be bolstered by the degenerate classification of nuclear as environmentally sustainable, which is not, of course. Particularly important when considering they can't decommission Donneray in the United Kingdom, for goodness sakes, for at least 315 years. They can't decommission Sellafield or even come close to it. They got 8 million litres a day hemorrhaging into the Atlantic Ocean, and they're going to classify nuclear as sustainable. They're particularly important when considering the benefits of small modular reactors that don't exist. You can't have benefits to something that don't exist and is decades away from fruition, rather than stuff that's available. And the person there, he's the global head of the nuclear apologists. The UK government has launched another corporation, for nuclear, called Great British Nuclear, the Great British Nuclear. Well, there is no Great British Nuclear. France builds the reactors in Britain, not Britain. It's a 100% construct. It's a straw man argument. With a mission to identify the best small modular reactor technology for the UK, whether this will be the Rolls-Royce small modular reactor, which is almost 500 megawatts, half the size of a large reactor. There's nothing small about it. It doesn't have any of the attributes of a small modular reactor. In the USA, where we didn't want the government to tell utilities what to buy, although we had no problems subsidizing and insuring whatever they built. Well, they didn't insure. What are you talking about? The Price-Anderson Act doesn't insure nuclear. It ensures nuclear industry doesn't pay you anything, but it doesn't insure nuclear, you against nuclear. Try not to lie too much. He said, here's our word. There's at least 21 announced small modular reactor lapdogs. Some with big name tech backers. It's almost as if some tech entrepreneur that can no longer find app startups to fund have plunged into nuclear energy. Now let's do some rough numbers. There's 439 nuclear power plants in the world. 413 are running, by the way. 92 in the USA, 56 in France, 54 in China, 37 in Russia, 33 in Japan, 24 in South Korea. None left after Saturday in Germany. Over the coming 20 years, I believe most of the reactors will have to retire. Well, a lot of them supposed to retired decades ago. Some in extreme old age. Figures that the new units might average 1/10 to 1/4 the size of the old ones. So maybe the requirement of 4,000 units over 20 years. 4,000 small modular reactors over the next 20 years. 200 small modular reactors each year. Or they won't be able to replace the current nuclear disease factories on the planet. Do you know the odds of the nuclear industry building 200 small modular reactors a year is 0. They don't even have an actual license certified. They have one application from scumbag scale. Let's say that the total market per year for the products is 200 units. With that optimal low cost per unit production point at 50 to 60 units, before you got economy of scale, the market couldn't support more than 4 manufacturers out of the 20 that's out there. None of them got a design in. Most of them came on board in the last 6-7 years, by the way. It's just a money grab, right? That's all that is. Insiders starting up companies. If they were serious, they would have a design into the non-regulatory agencies, aka Nuclear Regulatory Agency. Ontario Power Generation in talks to help New Brunswick problem-plagued nuclear station, aka nuclear reactor, aka disease factor, Le Pleur in New Brunswick. That's a picture from 2018. A poorly performing nuclear disease factory in a ballooning debt that has been unable to pay down. They're way in the hole. They've been looting it for years. Point Le Pleur Nuclear Generation Station, a plant in New Brunswick Power is owned and operated for 40 years. They just got an extension that I wasn't able to go to and bring them some sensible conversations. They got all the apologists. They had fire department there saying, "Oh yeah, we can handle a meltdown." You handle jack shit, you moron. Point-Le-Peur was refurbished from 2008 to 2012, blowing past an 18-month schedule. So instead of 18 months, it took them 4 years. The cost $2.4 billion, $1 billion more than the original estimate. It's normal nuclear. Like normally, for most nuclear, 90% of the money goes to administration, except for a new plant. But an operating plant, 90% of the money that they use is going to administration to pay wages. Because they all want top wages to be extra evil. Senior New Brunswick power official promises return to service would afford the financial flexibility necessary to pay off the $1 billion of debt over the following decade, as compared to $4.7 billion in debt on its balance sheet at that time. So rather than build a new plant, they were able to steal most of the money if they just upgraded it. See? That's why it cost so much. And because they stole so much money, they were over 2 years behind schedule. Because you get the money and then they steal it. They wouldn't do nothing. 90% of it goes to administration, see? That's why it took 4 years. They kept stealing the money. And they can't blow the whistle on each other because the nuclear industry fall apart if he does that. So instead, Point-Le-Peur became a financial millstone, suffering repeated equipment failures, unplanned outages. In recent years, utilities increased spending at the station in hopes of improving reliability. In some years, that seems to pay dividends. In 2019, the degenerate, disgusting World Association of Nuclear Operators awarded the facility a high performance score. In 2019, let me go back for a second. Because they do these awards, right, to cover up what's really going on. In a filing to the New Brunswick Energy Utilities Board last October, the utility admitted it was losing a race against a growing backlog of deficient equipment at the aging plant. I mean, they just asked for a 25-year extension. Got a 10-year extension. Thank goodness they never got 25 years. On December 24th, they suffered a partial loss of power. We covered this. Due to a fault with electrical cables that tripped the reactor shutdown system. This is the official story. 2 hours later, as is the case almost every single time, they discovered a heavy water hemorrhaging in the reactor building. And they sent people in there and they couldn't get the door open, right? To get back out. For like 2 hours or something. The reactor remained offline for more than a month, and they wouldn't tell us or show us anything. It was complete contempt for everybody that was supposed to be, informed about what's going on. They refused to say what, where, how much, or anything. And I mean, they refused it, right? To say it. Uranium is New Brunswick Power's second least expensive fuel behind hydrogen. Well, what do you mean? Like, you're billions in the hole. You spend billions trying to keep it operating. You're always breaking down. You got a lot of arrogance making a claim like that. That's the problem with the industry, right? Their reflex for everything is the lie, and the lies are so dangerous. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people end up getting poisoned. No, we had a leak. Leak here, leak there. If it melts down, no, we got a leak. In the financial results for the 9 months ending December 31st, New Brunswick Power reported the cost for electricity fuel had soared 380 million higher than the same period the previous year. And 2 years ago, New Brunswick then Auditor General Kim Adair McPherson signaled alarm in New Brunswick Power's debt-to-equity ratio, which exceeded 90%. It's humiliating. This is Canadian, so don't be surprised. Canada is probably one of the worst countries worldwide. No other peer utility in Canada has reached that level, she said in a statement at the time. Government mandated New Brunswick Nuclear Power to lower the ratio to 80% by 2027. There's zero possibility they're going to pull that off. It's just pure incompetence on top of it, see? They can't hire anybody good because the plant can't afford to do that, right? They can't contain anything, so they got to have perpetual lawyers. And then how do you keep all the lies straight? Well, they're pretty good at it, but lies are lies. New Brunswick Power calls for outside assistance for its existing reactor, raises questions about its enthusiasm for building and operating new reactors at the same facility, which is what they're claiming they're going to do with Moltex, right? It has partnered with ARC Clean Technology, which is not clean, it's going to be using mixed oxide fuel, a private degenerate company, to construct an ARC 100 reactor before the end of the decade. So they exclude everything for nuclear. There could be, like, new technology shows up tomorrow. That'll be incredible. They won't touch it because nuclear won't let them touch anything or look at anything else. It's an abusive industry is the best way to describe it. Utilities is also working with another private company. These are funded by the government, by the way, who started up a small company, had put $10 million into it. They gave $5 million to Motex and $5 million to ARC. And then they closed the company that they started up to take the money so that the government didn't look like it was involved in it. So you can't have a future with these people on your planet. These are just criminals. That's all they really are. These are criminals. Moltex, of course, wants to use the CANDU reactor and reclaim the uranium plutonium from the used fuel, which is mixed oxide, which is illegal in Canada. It was started up by Chris Scott in the United Kingdom, who's not a nuclear scientist or nuclear engineer, 12 years ago. They have no proven technology. But here they are in Canada making absurd claims, also claiming that the federal government needs to give them $1 billion so that they can do this. And change the laws so that it's legal to make mixed oxide fuel. This is pure mad. These are private companies showing up and destroying a sovereign country. And there's no one out there want to call them out. There's no police. There's no federal investigative, no forensic investigative journalists. There's nobody out there saying this is wrong, and quite the opposite. By supporting both ARC and Moltex, our government has positioned New Brunswick as a leader in nuclear. Premier Blaine Higgs celebrated the government's continuing support. But those companies only exist because the Canadian government started up a company that took $10 million from the Canadian government and gave each of them $5 million and then closed down the company. So it would be traced directly to the Canadian government. And both of these are not even supposed to exist. These are insiders. This is the government doing it for the government. Fire at nuclear plant in Japan's Niigata prefecture extinguished. This is a closed TEPCO nuclear power plant with 7 reactors. It's been closed since Fukushima. They have a fire in the reactor building. They said it was the washing machine. As far as I know, there's no washing machines in these reactor buildings. Period. You get the chances of getting the truth out of the nuclear industry is like trying to get the truth out of a 5-year-old. Did they eat the cookies when they're sitting there eating the cookies and they say no to you like a kid does, right? U.S. nuclear unique monitors can help with mitigation in cases of any releases from Fukushima. 880, very specific, 880 tons of radioactive debris at Fukushima. They're claiming that 3 reactors in Japan only have 880 tons. They're talking about the fuel pools too, by the way. The next large earthquake could bring very bad news. The earthquake is overdue. Every year on the anniversary, within a week or so, there's usually a massive $5 billion worth of damage earthquake 30 kilometers off Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. And last year it destroyed over 5,000 schools, filed insurance claims from damage to the schools. Even outside the Fukushima prefecture. But ground zero, where the decrepit and fragile reactors are, there was no damage whatsoever. So, how are we supposed to have a planet with this creature on it? These idiots in the nuclear industry in key positions. How are we supposed to have any future for any species? How's that going to work? How? Where's the poll to? Should nuclear power plants, fuel pools, aka disease factories, constant emissions, because they're splitting the atoms, be classified as weapons of mass destruction, WMDs? Well, yeah, of course they should be. Well, hell yeah, they should be. We got 38 votes, almost 100%. Of course, the industry got to troll me. They're not going to watch the video. They're there to spam my poll down. Anybody who votes no on something like that is... They actually know the difference, right? They're just being scum. The next large earthquake could bring very bad news. What do you think the last 1,000 earthquakes there have done? It's on a fault line. They built nuclear reactors on a fault line in a known tsunami zone where they're guaranteed at some point to have the mother of all tsunamis, guaranteed to have massive earthquakes all the time. The latest findings were conducted by TEPCO at the end of March using underwater robotics. There is no underwater robotics at Reactor 1 because Reactor 1 is destroyed. There is no containment. There is no fuel pools. Right? And so there's no law, by the way, against poisoning you for radiation. It's not illegal. The Congress, the parliaments, the diets don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the NRC has that authority. And no nuclear regulatory commission worldwide has ever made it illegal. Now, the parliaments, the diets, the Congress of different countries have the authorities to make it illegal to poison you with tens of thousands of chemicals, but not man-made radiation. In fact, that's the only thing on the entire planet they don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with, is man-made radiation. Everything else on the planet, they have the authority. Oh, well, we don't have the authority. We would if we could. Yeah, and you can change that rule if you wanted to, too. You would if you could. Doesn't quite work, does it? The latest findings were conducted by TEPCO at the end of March using TEPCO, which is not a decommissioned authority, which has no right, so they leave TEPCO or whatever company that was at the nuclear plant that melts down in charge, so you don't blame the nuclear industry, which deserves the blame. It's a perfect way to destroy everybody and all species future. Reactor 1 melted down and liquefied. The fuel pool blew up, for God's sakes. All right? The detonation, we've all seen pictures of it. Oh, wow. Saying there's 880 tons of untreated highly radioactive debris still remains inside all 3 reactors. It's infinitely more than that. These are perpetual liars. Real-time water monitors capable of measuring alphas, betas, gammas. Like, if there's alpha and beta and gamma, you can't measure tritium. Tritium is way too low of a signal to see if it's saturated with gammas, alphas, and betas. And no one at a nuclear meltdown is going to be looking for tritium. They're all looking for curium, which is the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods. At or below drinking water standards. And the standards are this bizarre military-industrial complex known as UN. One of their subsidies, like the World Health Organization, has said that it's safe if it's a whatever number. They don't have any authority in your country. They can't arrest you. They can't change your law. They can't tell your government what to do. They can suggest, like a think tank, because that's really what they are. And it's up to your government to take their suggestion, which they shouldn't consider. But 195 countries will do whatever United Nations considers an idea. Speaking of scumbags, this is Dr. Chris from Canada. He's starting to show up everywhere lately. And he's talking to the CEO of the Emirates, who's in charge of nuclear in Saudi Arabia. And you can tell he's a prick just looking at him, the guy on the left. And the guy on the right, of course. Chris Kiefer, he's a GP in Toronto, Canada. And he started up a organization, .org, doctors or whatever, for nuclear. And so he promotes nuclear. If you got a headache, you should get nuclear suppository. If you got pimples, you should get a nuclear suppository. He's the guy who, if he was alive 100 years ago, would have made radium lipstick and radium makeup and radium toothpaste and radium soap to kill you. I think he's, because we've covered him a lot over the years, he's despicable. Anybody that lies as much as he should lose his doctorate degree immediately. He's obviously a threat to every human that goes in his office. 16% of France's power supply blocked amid protests. France raised the retirement age. And so the country is burning everything they can get their hands on. The protesters. The French protesters, I love them, don't get me wrong, but they go too far sometimes. They burnt down one of the president's favorite restaurants. That's going too far. But setting cops' vehicles on fire for not protecting them, that's not going too far. The cops weren't in it, unfortunately, so can't win them all. In Paris, protesters set fire to one of Macron's favorite restaurants. Yeah, well, that's different. You shouldn't do that. You know, if he's got insurance, you still shouldn't do it. That's madness, right? There's other ways to get back at him. But France's protesters are not known for being politically correct. La 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 la. Try this again. And I'll show you a video of the French, how they normally protest. Now France, of course, radiated French Polynesians, every one of them. It's one of my favorite clips. I'll put it on the big screen so you can enjoy it. This is the proper way to protest.
The clashes were violent and widespread. Hundreds of police and anti-nuclear protesters chased each other through the fields and woodland near Vallon.
Yeah, baby.
Roadblocks were set up to try to prevent more.
Now, the best way to do it, so you see where the police are all there with their shields? So the protesters should have fire hoses with the big brass spittoon on the end of it. And so you can throw that over the shields, and then it comes down and cracks their helmets open. And then the protesters can kick the shit out of them properly, right? Just saying, like, if you're going to do it right. Ministry of Defense accused of cover-up has not released a nuclear safety report. I believe we done that last night or Sunday night. I can't remember. The British refuses to give up any freedom of information, which has been normal for quite a few years, to release it. Now they won't release it no more. And the Scottish government is accusing them of hiding accidents and releases and stuff like that. Because why won't you release it, right? So it's very suspect. Been accused of a cover-up for not releasing the annual safety assessments of nuclear weapons on the Clyde, which is in Scotland. And it's refusing to give reasons for its refusal to release the reports and rejected a freedom of information request. So Britain, last count I had, was 19 nuclear subs abandoned. They don't know how to decommission them. I don't think Britain's ever decommissioned a reactor. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hinkley Point C, which we covered a bit last night too. This is a huge freaking disease factory in the United Kingdom. There's Hinkley Point. They got 2 new nuclear plants that they're going to build, right? Hinkley Point, which is on your left, and Sizewell on your right. And both of them are surrounded by farms. You know what they're up to? They're going to poison you far away. The plant will eventually be cooled by water flowing through 6 miles of tunnels. They should talk to TEPCO. TEPCO uses a garden hose split 4 ways for 4 melted nuclear reactors. Save them a lot of material, right? Because TEPCO got the entire planet convinced that a garden hose, and less than a garden hose each day, 100 tons, is all they're pouring on 4 melted reactors and 8 detonated and melted fuel pools at this gigantic nuclear power plant in Japan. But in UK, they need 6 miles of tunnels, and it's around 4 billion gallons a day. So they can fill up the tanks in Fukushima. I can do the math for you if you like. Let me do the math. Hang on. They can fill up all the tanks in Japan. Oh, to be a scumbag like everybody in Japan. Bring it up. No fun if I don't bring it up. So 4 billion gallons. Divide that by 1,000 to get tons, right? 1,000 liters is a ton, right? I screwed that up. Clear. Let me do that one more time. No, that's not it either. Pay attention, Dana. 4 billion. I could have done it the other way. But just to be politically correct, multiply it by 4 to get liters. This is 16 billion liters. Divide that by 1,000 to get tons. 16 million tons. So each day they can fill up the tanks on Fukushima site 16 times. That's just normal operation. When they melt down, they need probably 5 times more water. Such is the life of nuclear. The overall cost of the project has risen to an estimated 25 to 26 billion. It's like the estimates I'm seeing is 30 plus billion minimum. Humanity is on the cusp of a giant leap forward. This is a sack of shit pro-nuclear scumbag. Now Japan realizes that the Fukushima nuclear accident was a major abnormality and that the historical data clearly shows that nuclear power is safe. Need I say any more? What a scumbag to say something like that. Radioactive sludge at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant near the storage limit. They're going to have to dump it in the ocean too, I guess. Got nowhere to put it. Had to do it. Nothing we can do about it, Dana. So what they're claiming, now the sludge is from the filtration, right? And he sees this. The growing amount of sewage sludge emanating from the Fukushima nuclear disaster is pushing the storage facility to its limit. Bear with me. High-intensity containers, which are storage vessels made of polymer and filled with sludge, are now kept inside a temporary storage facility located on the high grounds south of Unit 1 to Unit 4 at the Fukushima plant towards Tokyo side of the Meltdowns, right within sight a few hundred feet of the Meltdowns. The sludge, sewage sludge, there's no sewage sludge. There's not even sludge, wait for it. Will be stored there temporarily until a decision is made of how to dispose of it. It needs to be stored in concrete tanks as it contains an average of more than 10 millisieverts of radiation per hour. So they're claiming that like they call it sewage sludge, but this has got nothing to do with sewage. This is the leftover from filtering the tanks, they're saying, right? And they're saying that the doses are 10 millisieverts. There's 1,000 millisieverts in a sievert. And the water is at 2.2 sieverts per liter. So if you filter that, 1,000 liters, that's 2,000 sieverts. That means you can't get near the building, let alone change the filter. Forever. Which is like the glassification at Hanford. Once you turn those buildings on, you can't go back inside of it. If it breaks, that's it, you're screwed, right? And so they spend $18 billion, and it's taken them over 2 decades to build a site. Because once you turn it on, you can never turn it off. Or, well, you can turn it off, but you can never go back inside. So they're claiming that the radiation from the filtration system, that the containers, and they're saying there's 4,143 of them, are that's just because they got 1,000 tanks, right? This is why they're using these numbers, right? Because you got to get it to match up, right? It's a total hoax, obviously. We've covered this for years and years. And the real numbers I showed you about Korea earlier. Then 10 millisieverts of radiation per hour. Again, this is, let's add all the tanks up. Let's do that. 4,130. I'll bring it up on the screen for you. 4,143. So 4,143 containers times 10, which is millisieverts. So you got to divide that by 1,000 to get a sievert. So it's 43 or 41.43 sieverts in all of those containers total. So bear with me. Hard cases, man. Boom. We're almost there. To say they're insane is madness. That's the wrong one. There we go. I got way too many folders, my God. Let's use that one there. 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of water. So 20 liters, 5 gallons is 40 sieverts. Do you get what they done? So they say that 5 gallons of this water that they're filtering is only equal to the 4,143 containers that they gathered up over the last 12 years. So where did the rest of the radiation go to? Well, first off, the Riva system, the ELP system, the series filtration, these are the filtration systems, they actually didn't work. And we know that because I'm a sucker for punishment. No, wait. Okay, yeah, it's true, but wait, hang on. I am a sucker for punishment. My battery's gone on the bike. I've been trying for 3 days to get it to take a charge. It won't take a charge. I gotta get another one, I guess. Not guess, but a little disappointed today when I cleaned all the wires and redone it for the 3rd time. Still won't take a charge. Because I let it run down during the heavy winter, and I must have cracked it, I suppose. I got to be careful about what I'm doing too, right? Because I got a ways to go to recover. So, bear with me. Okay, well that's the logistics of it. So the Arriva system, which is the same as the ALP system, was the French system. In 2014, 3.5 years later, for the last 3.5 years, the system's been unused and kept out of operation. Then is the ELP system in 2014 in April, which is 3 years, 1 month after the meltdowns. The advanced system has yet to function reliably. So you have the Arriva system and the ELP system. No filtration system. So when they tell you that everything is in the tank and everything is filtered, there was no way to do it anyway, because the filter becomes so radioactive because there's so much radiation per liter. Claiming that there's 41 sieverts when that's just 20 liters of the water. So imagine filtering 1 billion liters. Well, if you fill up one of the tanks, there's 1.4 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human, by the way. So 1.4 million sieverts in a tank, just for storage, for instance, means you can't build another tank on site because it's a lethal dose everywhere on site. Because of the alphas, the neutron bursts, the gamma shines, the beta rays. Political madness. Councillor nuclear ban called criticised. An inner city Australian councillor are considering a radical nuclear ban which has residents up in arms. No, it just has nuclear industry up in arms. They might rile up some local support who works for the industry. She wants to ban nuclear. Bless her heart. That's pretty awesome. About time someone come to their senses. U.S. House bill to address compensation for veterans. Yeah, right. United States Department of Energy begins demolition of low-intensity test reactor, coming to you via the Degenerates of Degenerates Nuclear Engineering International. These are 100% despicable scum. And all the years and years and years of covering Nuclear Engineering International, the one thing we learned was these are degenerate scumbags. These are not even human. It must be artificial intelligence. No human can be as evil as Nuclear International. Okay, maybe, the U.S. Department of Energy, but and a whole another 100 nuclear companies, but that's it. Says the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management and its cleanup contractor, Ucor, who don't clean up anything. 90% of the money goes to administration with every one of these companies. It's just a money grab, right? And the government will be happy to give them more. Well, you spent it all. Okay, here's some more. Have a nice day. Let us know. Have begun tearing down the low-intensity test reactor. Well, low intensity compared to a large reactor. Anything at Oak Ridge National Laboratory is not going to be low intensity. It's low intensity compared to all the other disasters they got there, maybe, but it's still a disaster. One great big Superfund site. That's what a national laboratory is. And they got a lot of them in America and other countries, certainly. The training reactor, also known as Building 3005, built in 1951 and operated until 68. Well, why did you stop so soon? Why'd you wait so long? Right? You get what's going on? And a major accident in 68. And so they walked away, and 50 plus years later, they're going to finally try to demolish it and pretend that everything is normal, that it's, and they're very low intensity. Yeah, well, it's been hemorrhaging for 50-something years into the environment. Sellafield is reckless with taxpayers' cash. And early home time row. This is where the employees are clocking out early. It's nuclear industry. Who's going to hold them accountable? They'll just rat out the nuclear industry, right? They'll just blackmail them. So they just clock out whenever you feel like it. Well, they have their friends clock them out, basically, right? Is what they're talking about. They'll leave, and then their friends will clock them out on schedule. They'll still get paid for it. This is, every time we hear of the Albuquerque Museum, Nuclear Museum, very disturbing stories every single time. They have a daycare there for starters, right? This is a real indoctrination machine, this particular institution. And I've been covering it for years and years and years. KRQE, who has tried to assassinate my character in 2004 when the Waste Isolation Pilot Project had a meltdown, took my clips and put it up on TV and called me a conspiracy theorist. And the stuff I was talking about was what the news had released in the first place. The Nuclear Museum is hosting Discovery After Dark for adults. Well, they want the adults to bring their children there for daycare, see? So they can indoctrinate them and molest them and everything else. The Isotopes, which is, I believe, is a baseball team in Albuquerque. It tells you how batshit crazy that place actually is. Guests can enjoy the Nuclear Museum exhibits and participate in hands-on science. Make your own slime or liquid nitrogen ice cream. So this is an indoctrination machine at a museum meant to promote nuclear. Jan Boudart's article omits carbon impact of nuclear energy. Not their article, but the article that they're referring to. Hill's lead sentence at the time of another article contained two items in nuclear industry and government propaganda that are simply untrue. Because nuclear energy is neither carbon-free nor clean energy. Indigenous peoples' deaths and destructions of their unceded land by uranium mining. There's 15,000 abandoned uranium mines in the Navajo Nation. And they all have chemical ponds on them for extracting uranium. They're left behind. Milling industrial processes, well, if you look at Port Hope here in Canada, holy shit. And there's a lot of examples of that in the United States, like Rocky Flats and many other places. The secretive gases releases in Metropolis Pastuca from the uranium UF6 chemistry. Uranium enrichment contamination, forest school abandonments at Poynton County in Ohio. The final fabrication of nuclear fuels. Well, it's infinitely worse than that. All nuclear fuel pools are hemorrhaging into the environment. That's why we're going to poll tonight, by the way. Should nuclear power plants, fuel pools, radioactive, constant, brutal emissions be classified as weapons of mass destruction? Because the fuel pools, the fuel in it, the reactor cores are still splitting the atoms, and they will for millions of years. And so when you hear they got no solution for nuclear waste, they don't tell you what the problem is. The problem is it's still splitting the atoms. You'll never hear it anywhere else on the planet. And that freaks me out to no end. These carbon-intensive, resource-intensive, carbon's good. Without carbon, we wouldn't have a single creature on the entire planet. And polluting processes don't include thousands of miles of gas-guzzling radioactive material transportation from one chemical process to another as hazardous solids, liquids, or pressure. So, like Hanford in the United States, Hanford in just one go dumped 450 million gallons, that's their numbers, into the soil, just into the soil, of legacy nuclear waste in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, in one spot in particular, right? Which is equal to, let me see if I can find it. I put an article up on my site about it, actually, which is equal to, where's Hanford to? There we go. I might not be able to read that. Well, I'll put it up on the big screen. I can read it. So during the first 20 years, well, it was actually 10 years, 450 billion gallons. So there's 177 tanks with 56 million gallons at Hanford. And they spent more than 30 billion on a facility to seal it in glass, but it's not going to work because of the Wigner effect. So dumping 450 billion gallons, which is 1.4 trillion, 1,422,000 tanks. So right now they're talking about 56 million gallons and 177 tanks, right? But in one go, they dumped the equivalent of those tanks 1,422,000 times directly into the soil. And if you take a 6-foot wide aquarium, 518 feet tall, and wrap it around the entire planet, that's 450 billion gallons. It's an absurd amount. And most of it flowed into the Columbia River. And just downriver from the Columbian, or down the Columbian River, which is a major salmon sports fishing and major communities, millions of people depend upon it for water. There's 25,000 farms that feed off of that river, by the way. But just downriver on the north side, it was 70 sieverts an hour, which means if you're out there fishing, you drift past that spot, you're probably going to die within the next week or two from it. because it melts your organs and they continue to melt until you die. And that's just one of the many significant stories. Also, nuclear power is not clean. The Minnesota residents learned of a 400,000 gallons releases from, and he called it a leak, look at that, from Monticello. They waited 4 months to tell people, so it would all disperse down to the Atlantic Ocean and all the communities along the way, right? Before they mentioned it, so you couldn't find it. And then acted stupid, like, oh, maybe we should have told you, when the public rightfully and appropriately got upset. However, almost every nuclear power plant is a litany of one kind of unanticipated problem or another. A litany is the right word there. Also, routine releases of radioactive water and vapors do include some radioactive carbon-14. No, it's every isotope you can name is going to be in those releases. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation because they're splitting atoms. Each fuel pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. Each reactor building has 2 fuel pools. It's the most important thing in history is to understand that. That's why we're going to poll tonight. Should disgusting, despicable nuclear power plant, aka disease factories, fuel pools, emissions be classified as weapons of mass destruction? Is an overwhelming roger that, Dana. And as usual with nuclear accidents, there is no such thing as nuclear events. They're brutal, every one of them. As if thousands, the only benchmark used is death, as if the thousands of thyroid cancers, because people fall into that trap, right? There's 1,800 diseases. There's not just thyroid, not just cancers. The Chernobyl heart, which is real, 11 becquerels a kilogram will destroy a kid's heart. And radiation-induced visual handicaps aren't worth mentioning, like Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Affects people's lives are for, well, they cripple the family. These are debilitating illnesses, so they cripple the family too, right? And my heart goes out to all of those families all the time. I'm heartbroken. People's lives are forever diminished by the radioactive fallout from these disease factories. It was a long day, eh? That was a long day to pull this one off for some reason. It's just a lot of work. And then poof! Just like that, the show is over. Just like it never even happened. Now I gotta throw all of this away and get ready for tomorrow night's show. Get all busy, got a whole day to gather everything up again for tomorrow night. All in the hopes that the world will come to its senses. In the hopes that the world comes to its senses and fights back. And I believe some point we'll do that. And if not, I'll be here to help and guide and to incite, hopefully. Should nuclear power plants' fuel pools emissions be classified as weapons of mass destruction? Well, you know, I do believe that's one of my best polls. And I've had some doozies. They're always meant to start a conversation. And we know it's good because I only got 30 thumbs up. Which is an absurd small number. Woo! So they censored the living shit out of midnight. 30 thumbs up. Wow. Not even 80 total views. So when I end the video, I'll probably end up with like 60 views if I'm lucky. Because you don't want people thinking about that poll, right? Paul Bad. Dana Good. Paul Bad. So 29 likes. 30 likes. They're going back to 30. So that's super low numbers. That's absurd low numbers. That's ridiculously low numbers. That's a sickening low numbers. 30 votes up. That's basically an unheard of low number for me. I think that sets a new record for a show. 30 thumbs up. Something we've been doing for a decade. Japan nuclear expert, we have a crisis of a severity that can't be imagined anywhere else. People are abandoned and thrown away like paper towels. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates now nearly double the Japanese average. And that excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. And also we see that wherever they're shipping the food, you're seeing an explosion in obesity. So Canada has gone brutal in the last decade, or 12 years, because Canada had no restrictions. Japan couldn't ship it anywhere in Canada. And pneumonia was another one that they seen brutal after Fukushima and Chernobyl. Japanese doctor, Tokyo should no longer be inhabited. So why are they shipping food from the nuclear wasteland? Right, because it's banned by 55 countries for a decade. In 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. They never stopped growing food. It's a whole different level of evil. Every facet of nuclear. Nuclear has no bounds. It doesn't know when to give up being evil. It gets more evil, is what we're seeing from it. They take great pride in being insane. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Yeah, good night, everyone. Thank you. James sent off a PayPal. Thank you, James. Bless your heart, my friend. See, Stephen Young is there. Stephen, hi, Stephen. And it's not easy for Stephen to type, folks. So give him some leeway. When you see him type hi or hello, that's a big deal for him. He's got 3 years trying to recover and it's not going good. Lady Tabitha, hi. Let me do a shout out tonight. Maritime, Don Vincent, Dana Nasana, thank you for moderating, Dana. I don't tell you enough how much I appreciate it, but I really do. Albert, a centrifugal force. Thank you. I got your text message last night. I forgot to text you back. I was running circles. My apologies. I just remembered that I forgot to text you back. Blue Jay Outpost. Adam. John Shiflett. Hugs everybody. Thank you. Don Vincent, I said hi. Port Angeles. 2. Ryan Underwood. Yeah, look downstream on Hanford on Google Maps. All irrigated farm fields. Peaceware. Blue Jay. Let me just go up and do a quick shutter for everybody. I miss, we used to do it all the time, but since I had heart surgery, barely done it, right? I'm just going slowly up, or quickly up. I'm not going to get everybody. If I miss anybody, my apologies. John Curtis. Let me come back. Richard. I think I got everybody. Coming to the most recent comments in a second here. We got 31 thumbs up. That's the lowest number I've ever seen. Nuclear is really upset. We had that poll tonight, I would imagine. And the stories we covered didn't help. But that's not my fault. I didn't print the stories. I'm just covering the news cycle, right? We've seen the vicious censorship this last 2 weeks on me. It's just really something else. Angels Place. Almost through all the names there. Let me come back to the most recent. Anybody I missed? Thanks, John, which is centrifugal force. Suggesting people start reposting my stuff. And that's the only way it's going to work. I can't do everything. If you want to help, clip out the chop stuff from the videos that's useful and repost it on other sites. Google is going to censor you if you use my name, right? Looks like I got everybody. Okay, let's call it a night. Let's call it a night. 31 thumbs up. Holy shit. That's like a badge of honor to censor me that much. I appreciate it, Nuke Tarts. You guys are awesome. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. Because tomorrow night is Wednesday. And I will be here. Or at least the spirit of Dana. One or the other. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Don't eat any Japanese food, for God's sakes.